The US auto industry is facing a crisis, and this time, it's not coming from Detroit. In just the last 6 months, Nissan has slashed over 20,000 jobs worldwide, with nearly 2,000 cuts right here in America. Headlines are calling it the biggest pullback by Japanese automakers since the brutal trade wars of the 1980s. But what's really behind these layoffs, and how will this reshape the future of cars in America? Let's break it down. For decades, Japanese car makers have been giants in the global auto market, and the US has always been their crown jewel. Brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan have been dominant, regularly going head-to-head with Ford and GM for the top sales spots. But this isn't the first time tensions have flared. Back in the 1980s, Japanese automakers faced fierce backlash from American manufacturers, leading to trade restrictions and tariffs. To avoid penalties, they built massive factories, so-called transplants, across the Midwest and southern US, employing tens of thousands of American workers. Over time, they became part of America's auto economy. But fast forward to now, and the cracks are showing again. Nissan, for example, has seen its US sales plummet by nearly 40% since 2017. While competitors were doubling down on hybrids and electric vehicles, Nissan and others missed key opportunities, leaving them vulnerable in a market rapidly shifting towards EVs. Profits have stagnated, factories are under pressure, and the very foundation of Japanese dominance in the US is starting to look shaky. So, what's driving these massive layoffs? First, global supply chains are still a mess. The aftershocks of the pandemic, semiconductor shortages, and clogged shipping routes have hammered automakers everywhere. But Japanese brands, with their famous just-in-time systems, have been hit especially hard. The very supply chain model that once gave them an edge is now a liability, raising costs and cutting flexibility when they need it most. Then there's the electric vehicle race, and frankly, Japan's fallen behind. While Toyota cautiously steps into hybrids and hydrogen, Nissan, once a pioneer with the Leaf, has stumbled. Planned EV launches in the US are delayed. Canton's EV production has been pushed back to 2028, and they've already cut the number of models planned. Meanwhile, competitors like Tesla and BYD are sprinting ahead. Rising costs are squeezing margins from every angle. Inflation, surging prices for raw materials, and a strengthening yen are all battering profitability. Take petrochemicals, for example. They make up nearly a third of a car's material cost, and their prices have been swinging wildly. And it doesn't stop there. Labor costs are rising, and union negotiations in the US are becoming more heated. On top of that, there's the looming threat of new tariffs on Mexican imports, a serious issue when Nissan alone exports 200,000 vehicles from Mexico to the US every year. But beyond economics, politics is also playing a key role. The Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, with its tax incentives favoring domestically produced EVs and batteries, has put foreign automakers, especially Japanese brands, at a disadvantage in the US market. Japanese EVs often don't qualify for the full federal subsidies, making them less attractive to price-conscious American buyers. Add to that the growing political pressure for made-in-American production, and Japanese automakers are facing a market where US policies are essentially tilting the playing field. On top of that, trade tensions over tariffs on Mexican imports, a key part of Japanese automakers' North American strategy, are adding uncertainty. If those tariffs hit, Nissan's export pipeline of over 200,000 vehicles from Mexico could become much more expensive, forcing the company to cut back. Finally, this is all part of a global restructuring effort. Nissan is planning to shut down 7 plants worldwide, shrinking its global footprint from 17 to just 10 by 2027. And there are even rumors of a deeper partnership or even management integration with Honda. But that's not going to happen without major cuts and painful restructuring first. So, in many ways, these layoffs are a survival strategy for Japanese automakers trying to navigate a new global and political reality. The impact is hard for American workers who are taking the hit first. Nissan alone is cutting nearly 2,000 jobs here in the US, And with the scale of restructuring underway, that number could rise if another Japanese automaker follows suit. Production capacity in America is being slashed by 25%, with major facilities like the Simna and Canton plants each losing an entire assembly line. And when those plants slow down, it's not just the workers on the line who suffer. Local economies, suppliers, trucking companies. It's a ripple effect across entire regions. But the bigger picture is the battle for the future of the auto industry. While US brands like Ford and GM are making bold EV investments, they're fighting their own battles with unions, rising costs, and unstable supply chains. Meanwhile, as Japan automakers retreat, they're creating an opening for Chinese manufacturers who are aggressively pushing affordable EVs. What used to be a fight between Detroit and Tokyo is now quickly becoming a three-way race, and China's moving fast. Strategically, Japanese automakers are starting to shift their focus toward Asia and Europe, chasing growth in emerging markets and insulating themselves from unpredictable US trade policies. And behind it all is another silent force: automation and AI. As technology replaces more manual labor on the factory floor, the traditional promise of a stable, long-term manufacturing job in America is eroding, even without layoffs. Industry experts aren't pulling any punches on this one. Bloomberg reports that Nissan's decision to cut US output by a quarter is a direct response to unsustainable costs and the need to refocus on profitability over volume. In other words, they're no longer chasing market share, but just fighting to stay afloat. Meanwhile, the Financial Times points to deeper trouble beneath the surface. They highlight that the collapse of Nissan-Honda merger talks underscores the high stakes and volatility facing Japanese automakers in the global transition to EVs. And across the board, analysts are sounding the alarm. These layoffs might just be the start. As supply chains remain unstable, EV competition heats up and costs climb. Industry insiders warn we could be seeing the first wave of a much larger global restructuring across the entire auto sector. So, what does all this mean going forward? For American consumers, it could mean higher prices and fewer choices, especially when it comes to affordable Japanese models. And with Japanese automakers delaying or scaling back their EV plans, buyers may face longer waits or limited options just as electric vehicles are starting to dominate headlines. For investors and industry watchers, buckle up. Short-term volatility is almost guaranteed as companies restructure, close plants, and scramble to stay competitive. Don't be surprised if we see more mergers, alliances, or even cross-border partnerships, potentially between Japanese, American, and even Chinese automakers, as the industry fights to keep pace with global shifts. But here's the real question: is this just a temporary shock or something bigger? The truth is, while some production might return if conditions improve, the sheer scale and depth of these cuts point to a deeper long-term realignment. The future of US auto manufacturing is going to depend on how fast companies can adapt, not just to EVs, but to automation, AI, and entirely new market dynamics. For American workers, consumers, and investors, this is the start of a transformation that's going to reshape the future of cars in America. But what do you think? Is this a short-term shock or the beginning of a whole new era? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more real insights.